When did I first realise that I was a poet? That's a good question. Well, first of all, I won the chair when I was 15 in school, in a school Eisteddfod, and that made me think, ooh, maybe I should carry on with this. I'd been writing songs, pop songs, lyrics, terrible ones, thinking that my brother and me were Lennon-McCartney. And we got a big file of them, and it became an obsession with how many songs we were writing rather than the quality, maybe. But yeah, winning the chair at 15 when I think I was year 10 in school in Rhydfelen made me think maybe I should carry on with this. Maybe I have a talent for it, or I certainly enjoyed it. And then also the label poet is something that you can be uncomfortable with at first because, you know, it suddenly makes it serious, doesn't it? You're a poet. But then you have to accept the label, and you have to, yes, call yourself a poet some point down the line, because it's a pretentious act to write poetry and to expect people to want to read your poetry. And to think that it's any good. So I suppose, yeah, at 15 was when I started taking it seriously. And I realised, more than realising that I was a poet at that age, I realised that I enjoyed writing, reading, listening, seeing poetry. It did something to me more than maybe novels, even though I enjoyed reading novels and still do. A later diagnosis of dyslexia also in university. In my second year in university, I got diagnosed with mild to moderate dyslexia. Made me think, well, maybe poetry was attractive because the page contains less words. Dyslexia is to do with processing in the brain, and the mind processing things too quickly and skipping over things. With poetry, you can take your time. You have to slow down to, you know, enjoy each poem. You can read through them quickly, but, you know, the more time you take in a good poem, hopefully, the more layers and richness you'll uncover within that poem. So I first realised that I should maybe carry on with it at the age of 15, and that I enjoyed poetry as well at that age. Also, my parents were linguists, so it's natural to want to discover literature. My mother's from Brittany, my father's from Wales, and he studied French in university, and I went on to study French and Spanish, discovered the literatures of the French and Spanish world, and also studied Welsh. And, you know, we have this amazing tradition of poetry in Wales, in Cymraeg, especially in the Cynghanedd writing, the strict metre style of writing, and being able to learn Cynghanedd at 18, because we had to analyse Cynganeddion for A-levels in those days. So it was partly to be able to pass an exam, but then realising I can do something with this, and it's another language. So, you know, it intensified the label of becoming a poet, maybe learning Cynghanedd later on. And then, you know, in Wales, we honour poets in the Welsh language more than any other country in the world, possibly. You know, so being part of that tradition, which stretches back centuries to the 6th century and beyond, you know, 6th century is when we have recorded evidence of Welsh language poetry up in the south of Scotland and the north of England, Cumbria, you know, Aneirin and Taliesin. Well, to be able to be directly in that lineage is something very special that was attractive as well. What are the specific rewards and challenges when writing for children in your experience? Yet again, a good question. Children, I found when I was Bardd Plant Cymru for that 2-year duration, which was an amazing experience, and which is what permitted me to go to write full time, really, and left my job in Welsh language TV at the time, which was a rewarding job in itself. But writing and doing that came to a clash because I needed more time during the day to write. as well. But children, to come back to the question, children I think are the most honest judges of any literature. If something doesn't grab them, they'll show it in their faces, even if they don't say it using their words. And that's a brilliant test, I think, for your work. So having published Agor Llenni'r Llygaid, Opening the Curtains of the Eyes, was the title of my book for children with Gomer Press. I did a launch in my daughter's local school in Pontyberem, and really enjoyed that. They were laughing, and I found maybe it was the presentation between the poems as well, but it was a good experience, and probably the most nerve-wracking experience as well, because you have a baying crowd that's hungry for entertainment, and to be able to give them that is a fulfilling thing. But then to get reviews, and some children said the poems didn't grab them in a Golwg magazine, and others said they really enjoyed it. So, each to his own, and you come away, you can't please everyone, but also you have to please yourself. And maybe when you're writing, trying to rekindle the child's imagination within yourself. And it's very sad, that's something we lose, I suppose, as we grow old or older, as we lose the magical imagination. And that was another wonder and a blessing of being able to go around schools and do workshops with youth clubs and all kinds of things as Bardd Plant Cymru, was to be able to tap into that raw creative imagination, the way of seeing the world that always raises a smile or makes you see the world in a different way. So I learnt a lot from children and young people, and maybe we should listen more to what they have to say about the world, because they talk a lot of sense often, and hopefully some learnt a lot of, something about poetry or had fun with words. What I mainly concentrated on was the idea that we are simply painting pictures with words as we write poetry. Tynnu lluniau gyda geiriau, we say in Welsh. And it's a simple concept, but I think it's one that can make sense. And once children and young people realise that it's not just breaking up a paragraph to look pretty on the page, you need to actually have rhythm to it and a purposeful position to each word, and that the words use imagery, metaphors, similes, the trickeries of language and wordplay, rhyme, internal rhyme, and alliteration and assonance, and also elements of cynghanedd. We can have a lot of fun, and hopefully children can hopefully appreciate their language as well, because that was a big part of being Bardd Plant Cymru, was to develop people's use of the Welsh language in a creative way. Children definitely the toughest judges, but also maybe the most rewarding if you get it right. So how did the doctoral studies influence your subsequent writing, having had a career in writing and performing even before you took up the formal study of creative writing? Yeah, I've just completed successfully Viva for a PhD degree with Swansea University in Adran Gymraeg Abertawe, the Welsh department, in Welsh language creative writing. So I had to write poetry. Only have minor corrections to do now. I've got 3 months to do that, and then we can formalise the PhD. It's been a very rewarding process, and I've been very lucky. I did Bardd Plant Cymru, that job, the Children's Poet of Wales, between 2013 and 2015, and I had wonderful experiences. And then in October 2015, this opportunity arose to start studying for a PhD. It was supposed to be 3 years. You get an extra year for writing, and then COVID dragged things on as well. But we did a Viva through Zoom. But anyway, those are details that are not important, I suppose. With the PhD, it's been amazing being able to concentrate on just writing poetry every day, really, for the last 5 years, as well as dealing with the thesis. I suppose you're theorising and you're solidifying thoughts in your mind about your own practice in that sense. So it's also part of writing poetry, I would argue. But, having time to read contemporary poets, I'm now, having completed the PhD, going back to reading more middle-aged poets from the Middle Ages, Dafydd ap Gwilym, Iolo Goch, Tudur Aled, those masters of King Hammad, because I have a craving to try and understand their type of Welsh, because it can deepen my understanding of modern Welsh, but also seeing their techniques. So yeah, there was some navel gazing as part of the thesis. There was one little chapter where you had to analyse your own poems. Well, I'd written about 209 poems for the folio that I presented with a PhD, and then in the navel gazing chapter you analyse your own work, which is a bit strange, but which poet doesn't like to talk about his own work, really? But yeah, it was a lovely experience and definitely rewarding. And if you do get an opportunity as a writer to do a master's or type of qualification or degree in creative writing or PhD, I certainly would jump on it and grab that opportunity, because it's a time to deepen your understanding of your field, and also to improve your practice. Because also I had a creative writing tutor, Alan Llwyd. I'd go to his house every 2 weeks, and we'd, as well as eating tea and biscuits, we'd discuss poetry, and he would analyse my work and correct it, or I'd learn so much from being in his presence. And also Professor Tudur Hallam was my main tutor, and he taught me academia. So in terms of my own writing, when I started off, it was 11 years since I'd finished my undergraduate degree in Oxford. So going back to academia was a bit of a culture shock, and he told me that I was writing as if I was writing a blog at first. So adapting to writing in an academic style was something that I've enjoyed being able to do. But also, having that time really to write poetry every day and not think about other things was blissful. Does my love of the different languages I speak shape my writing in Welsh? Love of language is something that shapes my writing, I think, in terms of wanting to explore language and perfect it and use it to the best of my ability. I speak, luckily, through pure luck from my parents being Welsh and Breton. My mother gave me Breton, my father gave me Welsh. I picked up French from my cousins in Brittany, and then the only language, and English from living in Wales. And my grandparents didn't speak Welsh in Wales, so they gave me English, I suppose. And the environment, you can't run away from English. And Spanish is the only language I've had to learn. Due to speaking Welsh and Breton, I want to learn Cornish, so I'm slowly following lessons of say something in Cornish. You can have 10 free lessons. And what speaking those different languages has done is given me access to the traditions within each language, I think. The Breton tradition is interesting because there are elements of King Hammad, of strict metre poetry between the 1400s and 1700s in Brittany. So I've been reading up on that and writing a bit about that recently. And then, of course, Spanish has a wonderful, and French also, and every language really, has its own beauty, and appreciating the sounds of poetry in languages is important. But also, I think rap. I've enjoyed listening to multilingual rappers or raps in different languages, from French, Spanish, Welsh, English. That also gives someone a good perspective on rhyming and rhythm, and Yeah, and also the possibilities of macaronic poetry where you can flip between languages. That's something I've explored in when I used to be a rapper. I mean, I grow artichokes now, so it's not very hip hop. But maybe I need to practice. I mean, I need to delve more into macaronic poetry writing. But I also feel that I write mainly in Welsh because that's the language it's my first language. Breton is also my first language, but it's my second first language, if that makes any sense. And language is the Welsh language is the language I can use best to express myself. So it's only natural that I write in that. But also when you speak many languages or more than one, you see the bridges, don't you, between languages. All languages are connected in some way, even in their differences. So the dialogue between languages in my head, probably a very strange one, but yeah, it is influencing my writing, maybe in ways that I don't realise. Am I working on any writing projects presently? Yes, there's always a project on the go. I've delved into sort of, I wouldn't call them plays, but shows, theatric shows, mainly for young people. Theatre Menter Cwm Gwenreth. I wrote a musical, a jukebox musical. So I only wrote one song. The others, I picked the pop songs from from the Welsh pop world, and they used them, and then I drafted a story around those songs, and it was a great experience and an extension of writing poetry, really. When you're writing a long poem, it's like writing a play. So yeah, had that, and then I'm currently co-editing a book with Eirig Salisbury, and every month Eirig and we run a podcast called Clara, which is all about Welsh poetry, and we're co-editing a book called Y Gynghanedd Heddiw, Cynghanedd Today. So it's a collection of articles and musings by people who practice Cynghanedd in today's Wales, to see how Cynghanedd is viewed and used by its, because there's like any art or form or system, there's always debate on which is the correct way to do a Cynghanedd and everything. So yeah, that's a good book. Hopefully, it's shaping well anyway. And also then another another show that I'm doing is called Tywysogion, Princes, and it was meant to be ready for Eisteddfod Ceredigion in August, the National Eisteddfod in Tregaron, but we've got more time now to perfect it. It's a show about Lord Rhys, Arglwydd Rhys, of Dynefwr, and who had the castle in Aberteifi in Cardigan, and hopefully that's going to be a family show. I'm co-writing with Janet Aethwy at the moment, and also been translating a storybook from French for Riley Publications into Welsh, which was a poem, really, and it was called L'Abri, the shelter, and it's about refugees, and it's a great story, and it's the images are, they're drawn classically, and it feels like a 1950s children's book, but done wonderfully. So yeah, it's been interesting translating from French, and the French poetic style in that book anyway is very formal, and trying to reflect that in the Welsh has been interesting. And also I've got some ideas for writing, ideas are shaping for maybe possible new books, but books like that, looking 3 to 5 years down the line now. But I'd like to write about what I call devodai, which would be ceremonies, or I can't even think of the English term. That's another problem I have, thinking my English isn't very good because I'm thinking and writing in Welsh all day. But yes, so that's something I'm trying to work on, and there are the other little side projects in the pipeline also. So yeah, plenty to keep me busy.